Madam President, I rise today to talk about the disturbing leadership failure that we're seeing out of the White House. Over the past year, the President and his administration have seemed increasingly out of touch with the many challenges facing our country at home and abroad. 2 weeks ago, the President's spokesman told reporters, and I quote, "I think there have been a number of situations in which you've seen this administration intervene in a meaningful way that has substantially furthered American interests and substantially improved the tranquility of the global community," end quote. Let me repeat that, Madam President. Substantially improved the tranquility of the global community. Well, Madam President, fighting is going on right now in Israel and the Gaza Strip. Russia is actively involved in a war in Ukraine and recently played a role in bringing down a Malaysian airliner with 298 people on board. Iraq is virtually in chaos, with much of the country under the control of a terrorist organization considered by al-Qaeda to be too extreme. And those are just some of the most serious trouble spots that we face right now. And yet the President's spokesman claims that there have been a number of situations in which you've seen this administration intervene in a meaningful way that has substantially improved the tranquility of the global community. Madam President, not only can I not think of a number of situations in which the President's actions have substantially improved tranquility, I'm finding it hard to think of one. We're actually looking at more points of serious instability than we have seen in decades. Writing in the Washington Post over the weekend, the paper's editorial page editor noted that during the President's administration, and I quote, "We have witnessed as close to a laboratory experiment on the effects of U.S. disengagement as the real world is ever likely to provide," end quote. Madam President, disengagement is a good description of the President's attitude, because right now the President doesn't even seem to be paying attention. Obviously, America can't fix all of the world's problems, but strong American leadership can help, as we've seen many times over the past century. Strong American leadership, however, requires a President who's fully engaged, and this President is anything but. Tens of thousands of children arriving at our southern border. President's playing pool. Plane gets shot down in Ukraine. President keeps right on with his campaign schedule. Earlier this month, as thousands of unaccompanied children were making their dangerous trip across the southern border because of the President's statements that sent the message that if they got here, they could stay, the President traveled to Texas. But he didn't go to assess the situation for himself. He was, as the Associated Press reported, primarily in Texas to raise money for Democrats. Weeks later, despite taking multiple additional trips to fundraise for Democrats, the President still hasn't visited the border, despite calls to visit from members of his own party. Indeed, the President has largely stopped even discussing the crisis. And this is the same President whose spokesman described him as having substantially improved the tranquility of the global community. Madam President, our world is facing a number of very serious crises right now, and the President seems completely unaware of it. And when it comes, unfortunately, to domestic issues, the President seems equally out of touch. The President's recently taken to telling his audience that by almost every economic measure, we're doing a whole lot better than we were when I came into office. Well, try telling that to the American families who are doing worse. Average household income has dropped by nearly $3,000 on the President's watch. Meanwhile, prices have risen. Food prices are higher. The price of gasoline has almost doubled. College costs continue to soar. And health care premiums, which the President promised would fall by $2,500, have increased by almost $3,000, and they are still climbing. Combine high prices with declining income, and you get a whole lot of families who were once comfortably in the middle class now struggling to make ends meet. And the Obama economy provides few opportunities for these families to improve their situation. In 2009, the President's advisors predicted the unemployment rate would fall below 6% in 2012. 2 years later, unemployment still hasn't fallen below 6%. And the only reason the unemployment rate is as low as it is because so many Americans have given up looking for work and dropped out of the labor force altogether. If the labor force participation rate were as high today as it was when the President took office, our unemployment rate would be about 10%. Even when jobs do become available, too often they're low-paying jobs, not the kind of jobs that help middle-class families achieve financial security or move low-income families into the middle class. Take the most recent jobs report. Under the President's policies, the economy lost 523,000 full-time jobs and gained 799,000 part-time jobs last month, which is the largest one-month jump in part-time employment in 20 years. Madam President, I'll give the President this. He does talk. He talks about helping middle-class families, but he has steadily opposed measures to help them. Well, Republicans have proposed numerous measures to create good-paying jobs and to increase opportunity. We've urged the President to approve the Keystone Pipeline and the tens of thousands of jobs it would support. In fact, Democrats have urged the President to approve it too. The President has said no. Republicans have proposed fixing the 30-hour work week provision in Obamacare, which is cutting workers' hours and wages. The President has said no. Republicans have proposed repealing the medical device tax, which has already eliminated thousands of jobs in the medical device industry and will eliminate many more if it isn't repealed. A lot of Democrats agree with that position. The President has said no. And the President hasn't just said no to measures that would help the middle class. He has implemented policies that have hit the middle class with tremendous financial burdens. Chief among the President's burdensome policies, of course, is Obamacare. The President told an audience in Wilmington, Delaware the other day that thanks to his administration, and I quote, "Millions more now have the peace of mind of having quality, affordable health care if they need it," end quote. Well, try telling that to the Americans who lost their health care plans as a result of the President's law and were forced to replace them with plans that cost more and offered less. Or try telling that to the Americans who obtained health plans under the Affordable Care Act only to discover that their plan didn't cover the doctor that they wanted it to cover. Or tell it to the families paying thousands of dollars more each year in premiums, deductibles, and copays thanks to the President's health care law. That's not to even mention the drag that the health care law is having on the economy. Part of the reason there are so few opportunities for American families to get ahead is because the President's health care law is making it more difficult for businesses to afford to hire new workers. And now the President's following up his budget-busting health care law with a national energy tax that will drive up energy bills for American families and put hundreds of thousands of Americans out of work. Madam President, Nero may have fiddled while Rome burned. President fundraises. The Washington Post reports, and I quote, "In his 2 presidential terms combined, President Bush hosted 318 fundraisers. President Obama has already smashed that number with 393 events to date," end quote. And Madam President, he still has 2.5 years to go in his administration. And instead of urging the President to focus on crises at home and abroad, Senate Democrats have taken a leaf from the President's book and spent the past several months focused on the elections. Rather than taking up legislation to provide real help for struggling middle-class families, Senate Democrats have spent months on political show votes and designed to fail legislation that they hope will win them a few votes in November. Madam President, our country is facing challenges at home and abroad. Campaigning has its place, but here in Washington, members of Congress and the President should be focused on solving the problems facing our country, supporting middle-class families, and restoring America's economic vitality. It's time for Democrats and the President to stop focusing on politics and to start focusing on the policies that we need to create jobs, to grow the economy, and to support freedom and opportunity here at home and around the world. Madam President, I yield the floor.